Sorry to call you back after the lunch, but needs must. If we could get settled down for the third session, please. Thanks, Gwen, for organising such a nice lunch. Almost energising. Okay. So, into the third session of today's conference. This session is on sort of an extension of the decision support tools to anticipate future vulnerabilities and mitigation and options for stakeholders. We have got three presentations in this session. First up, we have got Harri Condie from the Environment Agency, who's going to talk about groundwater abstraction maps. Over to you, Harri.
Hi, everyone. As Barry said, I'm Harri Condie. I was a water resources specialist working for the Environment Agency on the Water for Tomorrow project. So the Environment Agency is responsible for regulating abstraction and licensing abstraction in England, and we have a statutory duty to ensure that abstraction is sustainable. So we will reduce licence volumes or modify licences to ensure that surface water and groundwater abstraction don't impact on ecology, or to reduce the risk of deterioration in the status of water bodies. So today I'm going to talk to you a bit about a series of groundwater abstraction maps that we produced as part of the project to show how much we would potentially need to reduce groundwater abstraction by to achieve sustainable river flows to support good ecology. And the aim of these maps is to help abstractors across all sectors understand the water scarcity challenge at a local level and start discussing what options are available to them to increase their resilience to water scarcity. So first of all, I'm just going to give you a bit of background to the maps and a bit of information on how we produce them. So back in 2019, the East Suffolk Water Abstractor Group, representing agricultural abstractors, approached the EA for support in understanding risks around the security of their licences. And their concerns were fed by a number of things. Firstly, East Suffolk is a hot spot for spray irrigation, and there's unmet demand for water. It's also a dry region with annual rainfall only averaging at 600 mil per year. It's classed as a water-stressed area, and most water bodies are either over-abstracted or over-licensed at low flows. Abstractors had also witnessed others in their sectors being impacted by licence reductions and revocations or potential reductions to protect designated sites in the neighbouring catchment of Broadlands. So they wanted as much notice as possible of any licence changes so that they could adapt if licence changes were happening in East Suffolk. So we produced a series of large-scale maps showing data for each water body, such as abstracted volumes across sectors, flow compliance, potential licence caps to prevent deterioration, and crucially, potential reductions in groundwater abstractions required to meet sustainable low flows and how these could be split across sectors. So these groundwater reductions are based on output from a tool called Fix-It. So the Fix-It tool can give an estimate of how much we need to reduce groundwater abstraction by in a catchment to achieve flows that are at a level that can support the needs of the environment. So starting in the headwaters of a river, the Fix-It tool will reduce groundwater abstraction at each licence point, passing on the improvements in river flow until flows meet the needs of the environment in all surface water bodies down to the sea. So the tool will account for how abstraction from a single point can impact on multiple water bodies. So it will reduce abstraction in the local catchment to achieve sustainability in the local catchment, in neighbouring catchments, and in downstream catchments. It's not possible for the tool to fix all deficits. It's not possible for the tool to fix all deficits, as surface water abstraction may also be unsustainable. And also, in some cases, groundwater abstraction is not the major cause of flow issues. So through the Water for Tomorrow project, we wanted to make this really useful information that's contained in these original maps more accessible to abstractors. We wanted to help them understand the scale of the challenge in their catchment and start to look at what options are available to them. We needed something that was presenting information at a more local scale and that could be read in 60 seconds, but could still contain all that useful information around licence risks and opportunities. So we've drilled down into the original data and presented the Fix-It results at a much finer scale and included lots of other bits of information, local information around abstraction volumes, sustainable flows, and opportunities for new surface water abstractions. So in East Suffolk, we've broken the area down into 21 local areas. And the idea is that an abstractor can look at this master map, identify where they abstract from, and therefore which local map is relevant to them. So here's an example of an average map. In each map, you'll see typically 3 to 4 catchments and their surface water bodies. We picked out all the abstraction points. So circles show those for groundwater, triangles show those for surface water, pink shows licence points that are on a permanent licence, and blue show license points that are attached to a licence with a time limit. We also show the recent actual average volume of groundwater abstraction per day and the total volume that is available to abstractors on their groundwater licences. And the pie charts show how that is split across sectors. We've also got information on the current flow status and how that compares to the level of flow that can support good ecology. And this is based on the average level of abstraction and also if abstractors were to increase their takes to the full licence volume. In the boxes that you can see, we've shown what the Fix-It tool suggests the volume of groundwater abstraction per day needs to be reduced to achieve those sustainable flows. And we've compared that to average levels of abstraction and fully licensed volumes. Where there are time-limited groundwater licenses, we have included information on how much unused water we might remove from the licenses to reduce the risk of deterioration in flows as a result of abstractors increasing how much they take. So in East Suffolk, that applies to all groundwater licenses because of the in-combination impact that increasing abstraction above recent average levels could have on surface water flows. We've also included information on the potential for new abstractions. So we are not issuing any new licenses for consumptive groundwater abstraction, but there is a lot of potential for surface winter water abstractions. So we've set out the level of flows that you could abstract at and the potential reliability of those new abstractions. So obviously there's a lot of information here. So we've accompanied the maps with an information sheet which can walk an abstractor through the information contained in each map. So before I go through a few examples of these maps, I just want to reiterate the purpose. So these are a communication and engagement tool. It's not about exact figures, these are just estimates. It's about indicating the scale of change and where that change might occur, raising awareness ahead of changes, facilitating early action, and encouraging collaboration. They're also a starting point for local investigations into options. For example, that's where that surface water information is really useful on the potential for winter water abstractions. So there are some caveats and limitations to the maps. The Fix-It tool is a very broad brush tool, and it doesn't account for local issues. It doesn't account for climate change or growth, protected area needs, or local flow targets. It also assumes that licence reductions are the only option. It only looks at compliance at low flows, and it only looks at compliance at the outflow point, so the bottom of a water body. The maps I'm showing here is also based on 2014 to 2018 data. And the maps don't include changes to surface water licenses. We're purely looking at groundwater licenses here. But as mentioned previously, there is an information sheet which sets out these caveats. So now I'm going to go through some examples of how we presented the situation in different water bodies and what maps might look like for what we would consider a low risk or a high risk catchment. So this is an example of a low risk catchment. So as you can see, flows are sustainable at both current and fully licensed abstraction rates. So no reductions in groundwater abstraction are suggested by the Fix-It tool. But we still have that really useful information about how much groundwater is being abstracted in the catchment and by which sectors. We've also got that information on whether there are opportunities for new surface water abstractions. Now, there is one reduction in this catchment, and that's to a time-limited groundwater licence. And that's because we need to reduce that overall wider risk to surface water catchments in East Suffolk if abstractors were to increase their level of take beyond recent average levels. And that's set out in the box you can see there. So moving on to a more high-risk catchment. Here we can see that flows are unsustainable in the catchments to the north. Starting with the relief channel to the north, the Fix-It tool has suggested that in order to restore low flows to sustainable levels, we would need to remove all groundwater abstraction from the catchment. And you can see by the pie charts that this would mean removal of spray irrigation licences. So it could have a big impact on agriculture locally. Moving on to the next catchment, Buckersham Mill River. Again, flows are unsustainable here, but the Fix-It tool has not suggested any reductions. And this is because groundwater abstraction is not the major impact on flows. If you look along the course of the river, there's a number of permanent surface water licences, and it's actually surface water abstraction that are driving these issues with flow. But there is a time-limited groundwater licence in that catchment. So again, we would remove unused headroom from that licence to prevent that risk of deterioration. Moving to the southern relief channel, here flows are sustainable. So we haven't suggested, the Fix-It tool hasn't suggested any reductions. But again, we do have a time-limited groundwater licence, and we've given an estimate of the cap on that licence to reduce that risk of deterioration more widely than the local water body. We've then got that information on, okay, if we need to reduce groundwater abstraction, what are the other opportunities locally? And you can see that new winter abstractions may be possible in the two relief channels to the north and south. But because of conditions in Buckersham Mill River, it's effectively closed to new abstraction. So we hope this is really useful information for abstractors and helps them start conversations about what options are available to them. We hope to roll out these maps over other catchments, particularly where there are a number of sectors operating. We would also like to look at, could we use an online tool which could be regularly updated? We'd also like to understand how we could better account for the needs of more sensitive environments and habitats, and potentially incorporate surface water licence changes, potentially look at climate change or growth projections as well. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Harry. Next up, we have two speakers from our partners in France. We have Philippe Le Coent and Adrien Manlay, who are going to talk about long-term water demand supply balance in a region historically not subject to drought.
Thank you, Barry. So I'm Philippe Le Coent. I'm an economist at the BRGM, and I'm afraid I'm going to do the rest of my presentation in French. So, nous allons présenter aujourd'hui les travaux qui ont été réalisés sur le territoire de la Cabralaire, dans le nord de la France, pour avoir une meilleure visibilité de l'équilibre entre les besoins des différents secteurs qui utilisent de l'eau, et les évolutions des ressources en eau, notamment de la ressource en eau souterraine sur le territoire. Donc ces travaux avaient pour objectif d'être une étape préalable avant l'élaboration de stratégies de gestion de l'eau à long terme sur le territoire. Donc c'est des travaux qui ont été réalisés donc, par moi-même, par Adrien qui va présenter avec moi, qui est hydrogéologue, au BRGM également, et en étroite collaboration avec la direction de l'eau de la Cabalère. Alors, dans le nord de la France, jusque-là, les eaux souterraines représentent une part importante des besoins en eau sur le territoire et sont couverts très fortement par les eaux souterraines, notamment l'aquifère de la Craie, avec 87% des besoins en eau potable et 55% des besoins en eau globalement. Alors, jusqu'à présent, je dirais qu'il y a une relative perception d'abondance de la ressource dans la zone par rapport la disponibilité de cette ressource en eau souterraine de l'aquifère de la Craie, lié également à des évolutions plutôt de baisse de consommation qui ont eu lieu dans les 20 dernières années, aussi bien de la consommation en eau industrielle, mais aussi de la consommation en eau potable. Toutefois, depuis quelques années, il y a eu un certain nombre d'événements et qui ont montré que le changement climatique commençait à opérer des modifications sur le territoire. Donc il y a eu des sécheresses assez importantes en 2017, 2019, 2022, qui ont mis en évidence une évolution de la disponibilité de la ressource sur le territoire. Et puis également, on perçoit également une évolution récente des usages, avec une reprise de la consommation d'eau dans un certain nombre de domaines, une volonté de réindustrialiser le territoire et donc de potentiellement avoir des nouveaux besoins en eau sur le territoire, des besoins, des usages qui liés au changement climatique d'eau potable qui augmentent également sur le territoire, et puis des besoins en eau agricole qui semblent aussi augmenter de façon assez importante sur le territoire. Donc l'objectif de l'étude que l'on a réalisée dans le cadre du projet Water for Tomorrow a été d'essayer de mieux comprendre l'évolution à laquelle on pouvait s'attendre des usages de l'eau sur le territoire, des usages futurs, à l'aide de la formulation de scénarios prospectifs des usages de l'eau en s'appuyant sur une participation des acteurs du territoire. Le deuxième point, c'était de modéliser les effets du changement climatique sur l'évolution de la ressource en eau sur le territoire, et puis d'essayer d'intégrer ces deux éléments pour mieux comprendre l'équilibre entre les besoins et les ressources, aboutir à un diagnostic partagé et pouvoir initier une réflexion sur des futures stratégies de gestion de l'eau qui pourraient être mises en œuvre sur le territoire. Alors, les différentes étapes du processus qui ont été réalisées, donc l'idée a été d'avoir une construction, donc sur le volet évaluation de la demande notamment, d'avoir une construction participative de scénarios des usages de l'eau, avec dans l'idée de déterminer quelles allaient être les évolutions possibles de ces usages de l'eau dans le futur. Donc l'idée a été d'impliquer la plupart des acteurs, enfin les acteurs de tous les secteurs dans la formulation de ces stratégies. Donc on a eu les acteurs des différents usages, donc des industriels de l'industrie agroalimentaire, les agriculteurs notamment par l'implication de la Chambre d'agriculture du Nord-Pas-de-Calais, et puis également les collectivités et les opérateurs de l'eau potable. Et puis on a également impliqué les services de l'État, donc les agences de l'eau, voilà, l'ensemble des acteurs qui sont impliqués dans la gestion de l'eau sur le territoire, et évidemment les différents services de la Cabalère. Donc dans une première étape, l'idée a consisté à réaliser des entretiens exploratoires auprès de ces différents acteurs qui ont permis de formuler un certain nombre d'hypothèses sur les évolutions possibles des usages de l'eau dans le futur. Et donc ces hypothèses ont ensuite été présentées lors d'un premier atelier et elles ont été discutées, validées et ont permis d'élaborer des scénarios d'usage de l'eau pour les différents usages. Ces scénarios ensuite ont été analysés et dans le cadre de la modélisation hydrogéologique, des simulations ont été réalisées et nous avons pu présenter les résultats lors du deuxième atelier qui a été réalisé sur le territoire. Ce qui s'est passé, c'est que lors du deuxième atelier, les conclusions finalement, à partir des premiers scénarios que l'on avait élaborés, ne conduisaient pas à identifier un scénario, enfin une situation difficile. Donc on a dû décidé de remettre en discussion ces scénarios et de formuler peut-être des scénarios un peu plus pessimistes, on va dire, en termes d'évolution des usages pour voir quel impact cela pourrait avoir sur le système. Et ensuite, ces nouveaux scénarios ont été présentés lors d'un troisième atelier et qui ont été également l'occasion de réfléchir à des stratégies d'adaptation et de gouvernance sur le territoire.
Et donc, pour l'approche de modélisation hydrogéologique qui a été déployée, en fait, c'est une approche qui se base sur un ensemble de simulations. Donc en fait, pour évaluer l'impact du changement climatique et des scénarios prospectifs des usages de l'eau, on se base donc sur tout cet ensemble de forçages pour le modèle hydrologique. Et donc on part en fait des scénarios de gaz à effet de serre, donc qui sont en fait des scénarios tels que produits par le GIEC. Donc on en utilise deux, un scénario plutôt médian, le scénario RCP 4.5, et un scénario plus pessimiste, le 8.5. Donc avec le médian qui consiste à limiter le réchauffement global à 2 degrés à la fin du siècle, et le plus pessimiste qui conduit à un réchauffement de 4 degrés à l'échelle globale à la fin du siècle. Donc ces scénarios sont utilisés par les services climatologiques pour modéliser l'évolution des conditions atmosphériques jusqu'à la fin du siècle à travers de différents modèles climatiques. Et donc ce sont ces sorties de simulation que l'on va utiliser pour venir forcer le modèle hydrogéologique en complément des scénarios d'usage. Donc pour ce qui est des modèles climatiques, en fait, chaque modèle a sa propre représentation des processus de l'atmosphère et conduit à des résultats différents. Donc, pour prendre en compte cette incertitude et ce panel de variations possibles, on utilise 5 modèles climatiques qui sont jugés représentatifs sur le territoire qu'on analyse. Et puis, sur les scénarios d'usage, eh bien, on utilise 3 scénario au total, donc un scénario constant. On considère que les prélèvements n'évoluent pas, ce qui fera office de scénario de référence, puis les 2 scénarios que Philippe va vous présenter. Donc on aboutit sur ce processus d'ensemble à une 30aine de simulations nécessaires pour évaluer donc l'évolution des ressources en eau et l'évolution de ce bilan besoin ressources à la fin du siècle. Pour ces simulations, donc, on utilise un modèle hydrogéologique distribué, donc c'est-à-dire qu'en fait, on va analyser le territoire donc de manière spatiale, donc avec des mailles qui vont venir représenter les écoulements sur le territoire de la Cabalère. Et donc, on regarde ensuite les sorties de ce modèle via différents indicateurs dont je vous reparlerai juste après.
Donc là, je vais vous présenter la méthode qui a été utilisée pour la prospective sur les usages. Donc en ce qui concerne l'eau potable, l'idée a été d'appliquer un certain nombre d'hypothèses qui ont pu être traduites ensuite en évolution de la consommation. Donc on a fait des hypothèses sur la démographie, l'évolution de la démographie. On a fait également des hypothèses sur les évolutions de la consommation des ménages en introduisant des effets, par exemple, des changements d'usage, comme par exemple l'évolution des équipements vers des équipements plus hydroéconomes, mais également le développement de piscines associées à l'évolution du climat sur le territoire. On a pu également intégrer des scénarios sur l'amélioration des réseaux et l'amélioration de ces rendements, et puis des évolutions également en termes de transfert d'eau vers d'autres territoires voisins de la Cabalère. En ce qui concerne l'industrie, le design de scénario était un peu plus compliqué parce que l'évolution des usages peut être très fortement affectée par l'installation d'une nouvelle industrie. Donc là, on a décidé d'avoir une approche assez conservatrice, disons, où on s'est intéressé aux projets industriels en cours sur le territoire, qu'on a pu changer en besoin en eau et qu'on a intégré ensuite dans nos scénarios. Enfin, le plus difficile, je dirais, a été la question de l'agriculture. Et ça revient à la question the elephant in the room qui a été évoquée tout à l'heure. Quel va être l'impact en fait du changement climatique sur les besoins en eau agricoles? Jusqu'à présent, les usages de l'irrigation étaient relativement faibles sur le territoire, mais on assiste à une augmentation assez importante au cours des dernières années. Et les experts qu'on implique habituellement dans ce genre de processus avaient du mal finalement à établir des scénarios sur comment ces besoins allaient augmenter. Donc ce qu'on a décidé de faire finalement sur ce territoire, c'est de s'appuyer sur les anticipations des agriculteurs pour essayer de comprendre, d'estimer quelles pourraient être les évolutions de ces besoins dans le futur. Donc on a réalisé une enquête en partenariat avec la Chambre d'agriculture du Nord-Pas-de-Calais, où il y a 101 agriculteurs de la zone qui ont répondu. Et donc, où tout simplement on leur demandait quelles sont leurs anticipations en termes d'évolution des besoins en eau sur le territoire. Le résultat le plus frappant, et je pense que c'est ce qui est assez fort sur le territoire, c'est que les évolutions d'usage attendues ne viennent pas nécessairement des personnes qui utilisent déjà de l'eau d'irrigation pour irriguer la pomme de terre ou pour irriguer les cultures légumières. Mais en fait, les évolutions les plus importantes attendues sont pour des cultures qui jusqu'à présent n'étaient pas forcément irriguées, comme par exemple le maïs fourragé ou d'autres cultures de printemps. Donc à partir de ça, on a établi un profil type d'agriculteurs qui allaient pouvoir utiliser de l'eau d'irrigation dans le futur et dont on a spatialisé de façon assez simple la répartition sur les territoires et qu'on a pu intégrer dans nos scénarios. Au final, si on voit les courbes là, d'évolution des usages dans les différents scénarios, on voit que finalement, en termes d'eau potable et d'industrie, on n'a pas de grande variation attendue des usages par rapport à ce qu'il y a eu par le passé. Là où les évolutions les plus importantes sont anticipées, ce sont les évolutions agricoles, avec une certaine variabilité qu'on a pu mettre en évidence et qui augmente dans le temps avec les effets du changement climatique.
Et donc pour évaluer l'impact de ce changement climatique et des scénarios d'usage que Philippe vient de vous présenter, eh bien, je vous l'ai dit, on va utiliser des modèles hydrogéologiques. Et donc ces modèles ils vont nous permettre de calculer différentes variables sur le cycle de l'eau, donc à la fois des débits de rivière, des niveaux piézométriques, et puis évidemment de calculer les bilans d'eau dans l'aquifère. L'ensemble de ces résultats, puisqu'on va avoir donc un jeu de 30 versions de résultats, on va l'analyser de manière statistique essentiellement. Donc on va en fait venir comparer une période de référence qui sera la période historique à différentes périodes futures, donc avec un horizon plutôt proche, moyen ou lointain, donc à 2030, 50 et 2100 par exemple. Et on analyse ça via différents indicateurs statistiques, des tendances ou des indicateurs que l'on appelle standardisés. Alors, je ne vais pas forcément rentrer dans le détail ici, mais disons que ça nous permet en fait de reclasser et recatégoriser un événement humide ou sec par rapport à l'historique connu. C'est un petit peu le même principe que ce que vous avez pu voir ce matin sur les outils de prévision sécheresse. Pour ce qui est donc des tendances, donc cette fois, voilà, les résultats concrets du cas d'application sur la cabalaire, le signal, cette fois purement sur le changement climatique, est assez mitigé. Donc, c'est-à-dire qu'on n'identifie pas de tendance d'évolution claire sur les niveaux piézométriques jusqu'à 2100. Donc, c'est ce qui est représenté par les petits graphiques. Donc en fait, pour le scénario donc, le plus médian, la majorité des piézomètres analysés, simulés, ne présentent pas de tendance statistiquement significative. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'il n'y a pas d'évolution, c'est juste que ce n'est pas statistiquement significatif. À l'inverse, sur le scénario plus pessimiste, qui va être un scénario certes plus chaud, mais également un peu plus humide, en fait, on constate plutôt une augmentation des tendances à l'augmentation des niveaux piézométriques. C'est ce qui est donc sur la partie droite du graphique avec les tendances à la hausse identifiées qui sont majoritaires pour ce scénario pessimiste. Mais à ce stade, ce qui est important surtout d'avoir en tête, c'est de garder en tête qu'on s'intéresse à un ensemble de simulations et qu'en fait cet ensemble, il a une grande variabilité. Donc en fait, on a une certaine incertitude sur ces simulations long terme. Donc, on peut regarder tout ça via un autre indicateur, donc, qui est ce qu'on appelle l'indicateur piézométrique standardisé. Alors, voilà, comme je vous l'ai dit, ça va surtout nous permettre de comparer l'évolution de ce que l'on simule par rapport à un historique connu. Donc c'est le même système de couleurs que ce que vous avez vu ce matin. Plus on est vers des teintes bleutées, plus les niveaux sont hauts, et plus on est sur des couleurs chaudes, donc plus on va vers le rouge, plus les niveaux seront bas. Vous avez en haut un indicateur moyen pour l'ensemble de la zone d'étude, de la zone pilote cavalaire, pour le scénario 4.5, donc le scénario médian, et en bas, le 8.5, le plus pessimiste. Alors, les boîtes ont un petit peu bougé sur le PowerPoint, mais ce qui est important de noter, c'est que, eh bien, déjà, sur le scénario plus pessimiste, on retrouve une majorité d'événements humides, ce qui se dégageait déjà avec l'analyse des tendances. Par contre, quel que soit le scénario, ce qui est important de noter, c'est que ces tendances, elles ne préjugent pas de l'absence d'événements extrêmes. C'est-à-dire qu'on voit en fait apparaître à plusieurs reprises dans les simulations des événements à la fois humides, mais aussi et surtout secs, qui peuvent être assez intenses, donc atteindre les couleurs orangées, et assez longues, durer plusieurs années. C'est-à-dire qu'on a plusieurs années où les niveaux piézométriques vont être considérés comme bas. Enfin, pour analyser cette fois plutôt le côté équilibre besoin-ressources, donc l'impact des différents scénarios de prélèvement qui vous ont été explicités, eh bien, cette fois-ci, on va regarder non pas par indicateur statistique, mais purement simplement ce que l'on a simulé, une moyenne en base eau d'une période de référence par rapport à une période future. Et on regarde eh bien, la différence qu'on a entre ces deux états et à quoi on aboutit selon le scénario de prélèvement. Et en fait, cette analyse donc, qui a été menée sur les différents scénarios de prélèvement, elle nous permet notamment d'identifier un secteur donc, au nord de la zone, donc en aval hydraulique, puisque les écoulements se font du sud vers le nord, où on observe une diminution des niveaux piézométriques sous l'effet de l'augmentation des prélèvements, de par la répartition qui vous avait été également présentée par Philippe. Et donc finalement ce constat de baisse piézométrique très localisée due à l'augmentation des prélèvements, eh bien, elle soulève la question des choix à adopter pour la planification de ces usages, et donc de la stratégie à adopter.
Donc, pour conclure, ce travail en fait a permis d'aboutir à un diagnostic partagé de l'équilibre entre les ressources besoins à l'horizon 2050 et qui peut servir de base pour la planification et la formulation de stratégies de gestion dans le futur. Ce qu'on a pu mettre en évidence, donc comme ça a été mis en évidence par Adrien, des besoins en gestion anticipée des sécheresses et une zone du territoire avec une concentration forte de prélèvements qui nécessite la mise en place de mesures particulières. Alors en termes de conclusion, ce qu'on peut dire et de leçons qu'on peut tirer de ce travail, c'est que c'était une démarche assez transformative. Il y a eu un choix, qui a eu une volonté d'impliquer un grand nombre d'acteurs, y compris des acteurs qui ne connaissaient pas forcément le domaine de l'eau. Donc un des effets de ce travail, ça a été de pouvoir avoir un processus d'acculturation et de prise de conscience d'un certain nombre d'acteurs, notamment les élus du territoire, sur les enjeux de la gestion des ressources en eau. Un compromis peut-être par rapport à d'autres types de processus, c'est que du coup, une difficulté parfois à pouvoir avoir des propositions, des scénarios très techniques, puisque il fallait toujours avoir ce souci de pouvoir embarquer tout le monde dans le processus. Et puis peut-être aussi une question par rapport à l'utilisation de modèles maillés, de modèles spatialisés, qui permettent un diagnostic spatialisé, ce qui a montré un certain nombre un intérêt d'un point de vue pour l'identification de zones problématiques, mais également des compromis en termes de nombre de scénarios qui peuvent être testés et simulés et qui puissent ensuite être analysés pour faire de l'adaptation. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Thank you, Philippe and Adrien. The The final presentation on this session is Water Balance Model and Water Management Forum in the CamEO catchment. Speakers are Jim Stephens and Richard Whelan. So Jim, I think you're first, is that correct? We have plenty of time, so please take your time so the interpreters can do their thing.
Thank you very much, Barry. So I think before I go into my slides, I need to give you a little bit of context. I'm from a catchment, what we call a subcatchment, in the region of the Cam and Ely Ouse. So the Cam and Ely Ouse is one of the catchments where we have a catchment partnership which is called CamEO, and this is recognised by DEFRA, and it's a big affair. And it splits out into about 4 sub-catchments, which are really the local watersheds that split out from the big CamEO partnership. And we are called the River Lark. Probably I think we're about 1,400 kilometres squared of catchment by the time it runs out. And we have one big town located pretty high up in our catchment, which is called Bury St Edmunds, a population of about 80,000 these days, with some quite important industry located there. But essentially, like a lot of other speakers have stressed from our region, we are an agricultural region. So the tension lies between satisfying potable water supply, the public water system, and a large number of farm businesses that are dependent, need water. So in 2015, a colleague of mine and myself, we thought it would be very good to have a River Lark catchment partnership established. We contacted CamEO, and we discovered that CamEO were very interested in a River Lark catchment partnership in order to move on with the CamEO experience. But we sort of discovered, if you like, that it was somewhat of a vacuum. We walked into a vacuum. So we pulled together all the natural partners, and we were very fortunate because we had the leadership as well of our MP, who was interested in the water subject at that stage, and a very active and very engaged local authority. So we moved on. We started activities as a local level catchment partnership, and then we discovered, well, we need to do more than that, because there was a lot of river restoration work that we could do and a lot of activities that we could inspire. And so we formed a charity. So now we are a corporate entity, the River Lark Catchment Partnership Charity. We have a lot of enthusiastic volunteers. We've got a really good track record in river restoration work. We get partnership with Environment Agency funding to help us along with all that river restoration work. And since 2021, we've embarked on building up our citizen science capabilities, and we've got volunteers very committed to that. We are actually in partnership with the Wensum, so that very, very erudite, very, very good presentation about the Wensum. We're kind of alongside you, and we're joining forces, and we're pushing on with all that effort to get really good citizen science data and evidence established, and all those volunteers committed to the quality of our river. So that's a little bit of an explanation before I go into the presentation. So we benefited from this Water for Tomorrow experience by obtaining a local grant in the same fashion as the Wensum, and we applied it to obviously our needs, and we've had an experience of supporting the Lark abstractors group, which is essentially the farming, what has been called WAG in our region, the Lark abstractors group. And this is in really implementing and improving water sharing for advantage in the river water abstractions, where there is a strong potential for improvement. We also put the funding, the support with the farming sector was just north of 50% of our grant. And then we put the rest of the action to really our big push to get our citizen science program happening, and also helping implement an action plan we had forged along with all the partners, and particularly notably Anglian Water, for significant water quality improvement in the River Lark. And then finally, this was very much my gaga. This is what I've been concentrating on. We've looked to establishing a robust water management forum for the basin, with all the partners properly engaged. And the vision is to have a really good quality, engaged, cross-sectoral partnership to embrace the issues of water management and to integrate, to push that into forward planning and management. And I will really concentrate on talking about the latter, just to give you an understanding of the initiative. So basically, I worked on providing an information base that was really accessible and easy for all the partners, for all the stakeholders. So this is a fairly orthodox basin. There's a very large underlying chalk aquifer system, which is vital. I mean, that's where the water is productive from. And then there's a small river, which is very flashy. All the upper rivers are not really perennial, but it feeds into the River Lark, which in its lower reaches is a chalk stream in contact with the underlying chalk aquifer. So what was the initiative? A lot of work basically coming alongside EA, the Environment Agency, accessing all their information, which they were very, very pleased to share, and working on that to build up a really good, secure understanding of our basin, so that I could start transmitting that to the catchment participants. We are very, very lucky. You know, the Environment Agency for nigh on 50 years has been investing hard in very, very good quality precision modelling of all the water resources in our region. The modelling is It's variable across the region in terms of its precision, but it is very, very good quality. And in our what's called reporting area, which is essentially our catchment, the quality is extremely good, and the calibrations with river flow are very accurate. So there is no need really to go anywhere and reinvent any wheels. The need is to get a really good, strong appreciation of that very, very rich database and transmit it, make it accessible and easily appreciated by the partners. We then held a big conference. This was in November last year. We were very privileged. Our local MP was very happy to chair that, which of course helps a lot with animating a conference. And we got some 45, I think it was, attendees coming along to the conference. A very, very good and rewarding participation by industrial water users, the local authorities. We were at their establishment for the conference. A healthy representation of the farm businesses and abstractors from the farming sector. And of course, Anglian Water, the Environment Agency. So the conference, I think, was a success. I presented up as best as I could what the water resources in our region are all about. And I hope that led to an appreciable engagement. And I think quite a lot of people fed back to me that it was the first time they had actually kind of seen what the water resources are all about and what the picture is, which obviously was gratifying feedback. Lindsay Hargreaves, who heads up the Lark abstractors group in the Lark, gave a presentation along with mine about really all the issues that the farm businesses are facing, and the way they depend on water and the way their sector works, which I think was fully appreciated. And we had a speaker from Anglian Water giving an account to the conference about all the stresses and strains that Anglian Water are under to satisfy the public water supply, and most appreciably all the heavy investing that is going on through what we call WINEP, which is the industry's environmental programme, to address the environmental issues that need addressing through abstraction pressures. But the main object of the conference was to get all the parties to sign up to a water forum for the Lark Basin. So that is where we are now. A couple of weeks ago, we held our first Lark Water Forum. The task for us there was to make progress with the terms of reference. What are a suitable terms of reference for a Lark Water Forum? I wouldn't pretend that we've bottomed that one. We've still got work to do. But it was a lively meeting. And I feel the prospects are very strong for us to continue building and establishing a permanent, good quality participation for our local region which can build into, obviously, management and planning as we go forward. So that's it from me. Before I go, I would just like to say thank you very much to Gwen. I think this has been a terrific conference, one of the best I've ever attended. I just wanted to say that.
Hello, my name's Richard. I'm from Cambridgeshire Cambs Council, and you'll have to excuse me for being a bit of an infiltrator, as I've got a flood risk hat on rather than a water resources one. But I'm just here to give us a bit of an overview as to the water balance model that we've been working on a few partners with. So the aim today is I'll just really give you a bit of an idea of what the process is that we've been through, and then also a little bit of a hint on what some of the results are. So the Groundwater itself is a chalk stream just southeast of Cambridgeshire, and is providing flows downstream to the River Cam. Despite it being a chalk stream, it's a very flashy catchment, and there's a lot of till at the top, and it responds very quickly to rainfall. The groundwater is largely used for public supply, and is significantly stressed, especially in high dry times, such as we've had last year, and many of the upstream tributaries run dry during the summer months. So the work itself, we had a look at what opportunities there might be for using floodwaters to recharge the groundwater, and they initially looked along the main river corridor, which was effectively in the valley bottom. About 27 of the 27 areas of the flood zone looked at in terms of what designations there were there, what the ground conditions were, ultimately how permeable the soils were, and then dictating what the ability might be to recharge groundwater in those locations. Now, it's a fairly high-level review of the constraints and what's happening in the catchment. So yesterday, for example, I went for a walk in one of the villages there. We were looking at some opportunities where we might be able to do, and it seems quite evident. One of the locations, the soil was very, very claggy. You're not going to get an awful lot of water going in the ground very quickly at all. So there will need to be an element of further ground truthing. But what we did do was we've had some events with the local landowners. We showed them the areas based on priorities that were set by how permeable the ground was and how the potential might be. And the feedback was that it was fairly representative of what was happening in the area. So the areas that have been highlighted as a higher opportunity or a higher priority actually did find that those areas, whether there were faults in the clay or whatnot, the water seemed to disappear into the ground relatively quickly. The areas with a lower opportunity did seem to stay waterlogged for longer during wetter periods. So it seemed to be relatively representative of what we'd found in the modelling. So the next step was to have a look at the impacts that one of these areas may have on the groundwater. So highlighted one location and then had a look at the different rainfall over different periods. So there was some issues on the modelling front, which I'm no expert on when it comes to groundwater, but the cell sizes in the modelling very different for surface water flows compared to what they are for groundwater. So getting those models to talk to each other was a bit of a difficulty. But I understand the guys did a really good job on that. And then the perspective of infiltrating, allowing it to come out of the river onto the floodplain, infiltrating it into the ground, and then seeing what the benefits were for that. And you'll have to excuse the graph. I'll try and explain it. Ultimately, that's the change to the flow in the river as a result of taking the water out of the system. So you notice there's quite a big dip at the start. So if there is a peak flow in the river, by taking that water out of the system, putting it on the floodplain, allowing it to sit and infiltrate over a day or so, you see quite a dramatic improvement from a flood risk point of view. From a groundwater point of view, the benefit was relatively localised. it was getting back into the system, as you'd expect, being close to the main river. It's getting back into the system relatively quickly. But you would notice an improvement in flow immediately adjacent over a period of about 5 months. So there is a potential there to look at the fact that by taking the water out of the system, getting it into the ground and allowing it to naturally come back into the watercourse, you have got potential for the benefit in the flow in the river to translate into the summer months. It won't, the best will in the world. At the moment, we're seeing our spring showers disappearing, as I'm sure a few landowners will notice. And there is a risk that if you don't get those April showers, that benefit might be disappearing before the summer even starts. Just having a look at the sort of the longer term benefits and the potential, there is potential if you're combining it as a part of the wider system, and you're looking upstream and you're looking at smaller interventions as well as those larger ones, and you're working as a whole in the catchment, that will take longer to travel down to the main river. So having a whole catchment approach, looking at the smaller interventions upstream, can potentially have quite a significant benefit if you've got enough in place. One of the areas to look at was it's kind of highlighted. I think somebody raised the question on the poll that a number of disciplines that are involved and the range of benefits that you can provide are quite vast. And you need to get those conversations, such as they've had in the Lark and wider afield, getting all those different sectors in, because you can quite easily introduce something that is of benefit to one area, but then will be detrimental to another area. So whether that is the amount of land that you might take out of production to be able to do certain features, or whether it's the fact that a bare soil would provide a greater infiltration than a heavily vegetated one, and then there's the conflict between the amount of losses you would have if you were looking at rewilding or something like that versus a clear landscape. So there is that. I suppose one of the main points that we come out of that is that there is plenty of potential for wider benefits, even in the areas where there wasn't a large amount of permeability, because you can potentially increase the habitat, you can increase the habitat, you can polish the water so it's cleaner when it gets downstream, and depending on who's involved and what the drivers are, is very much a case of needing to get down to the nuts and bolts of what can happen in that field before you get too far down the road in deciding. And that's been really useful, because we've had engagement with the landowners. We can start to have more conversations with the catchment partnerships and ultimately get to that point where we can start looking at those plots of land and are they viable, are they not viable, and what can we do? And I think that's me. Thank you.
Stay there 1 second, Richard, because we've had one quick question that's come in directly for you, which is what kind of recharge solutions were considered?
So the areas themselves, when we've looked at them, we've not looked at the type of asset that would be constructed. We've looked at there is an area that's got potential for recharge, and if we could utilise that recharge across that whole area, then how much of a benefit might that provide? Realistically, if you're looking upstream, it could be wetlands, it could be, not in a chalk catchment, but in a different catchment, might be looking at tree planting to get more water into the ground with a root zone. But we've not looked at, in this location, we've not looked at the actual assets that will be going in. Okay.
Thank you very much. So if I could please ask Harri, Philippe and Adrien to come back on the stage for some questions. Slight change from this morning in that there are some mics on the seats, I think. Maybe just one mic. I can't see if there's more. So we'll have to pass that along when we answer. That's to avoid feedback for the interpreters' booths. So please do keep coming in with your questions on Slido. To kick us off, we've got a question here which is for Philippe and Adrien. Is there a plan for the next steps in France in terms of how the authorities will balance the predicted increases in water use against the reducing supply? So I'm not sure who would like to take that first.
Is it on? Yeah.
Yep.
So yes, there are different steps that are considered after the work that has been done. We have to consider that the work we have done has been done in administrative territory, which is the Cabaler, and there is also a water basin agency that is also doing other types of work. So at the administrative level, following the work that we have done, a proposal from the last workshop has been to set up a specific multi-sector committee that will be related to another the economic development committee that has been that exists in the Cabaler area, and then that has designed recently a territorial development plan. And so one of the recommendations has been to develop within that territorial development plan a specific activities related to the management of water. At the same time, at the water basin level, there is this territory is going to be one of the first territory in the region in which they want to start implementing what they call volumetric collective management of irrigation use. And so the results of the study are going to be used to as a basis to decide what would be the volume that would be shared among the farmer in the area. The system is a bit different in France. The management of water by farmers is collectively managed in this area in general.
Thank you. Adrien, did you want to add anything? No. Okay. It's weird hearing myself through those. So I'm going to just follow up on that. I'm just interested to know whether the sort of delivering the message in an area that's not had any water issues in the past, that there may be some in the future. Is that an easy one to land with the authorities, particularly given the uncertainties of the climate change scenarios?
Non, donc effectivement, l'incertitude reste assez difficile à évaluer et surtout à pouvoir expliquer simplement pour que ça puisse être intégré dans la gestion. Néanmoins, ça fait partie des pistes d'amélioration de ce type d'études aussi, puisque c'est un élément très important des simulations multiscénarios, de mieux évaluer ces incertitudes et pouvoir mieux les prendre en compte dans la gestion.
The weather conditions have helped us very much in this endeavor. We've had the 2022 year, and definitely the water issues has really come up on the agenda. And I think another point that, and this is related to the fact that the Cabaler has taken the competency on water as a whole, and that recently some of the development projects, be there industry or also residential, new residences, have been blocked or limited because of water availability on the area. So people have started to realize that they are not sitting on unlimited resource and that they need to manage this resource in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Questions for you, Harry, that have come in here. First one is how much resource or time is needed in producing one of the groundwater abstraction maps?
Okay, so these maps here, it was quite intensive to produce them. I think going forward, one of the things I'd like to explore is using sort of more GIS products, possibly Power BI, something like that can be regularly updated. So I think in the future that development time will come down. But yes, certainly in that sort of early stages of working out what people wanted and the development, they were very intensive.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. And also there's a question here for you about you worked predominantly with the agricultural sector in those maps. Did you also target abstractors like water companies and other industry and how they would need to reduce their abstraction?
Yeah, so although the maps were really sort of initiated by that contact with SWAG, they do cover all sectors, so we haven't looked just at agriculture. The Fix-It tool looks at all abstraction points within a catchment and does look at the reductions across all sectors that would be needed. I think the difference comes in terms of how those licence reductions are delivered. So for water companies, that would be delivered through the WINEP, or Water Industry National Environment Programme, and their Water Resource Management Plan, which currently, watch this space, is not available for agriculture.
Yeah, thanks. There's another question here about, could you explain how the Fix-It tool works?
Yeah, okay.
Quite a big one, I can imagine.
So the Fix-It tool is a spreadsheet. So what it does, we have in the EA, we have a tool called Water Resources GIS. And within that tool, we take all the information on licenses and within the WRGIS, we're able to distribute the impact of a groundwater license on up to 5 water bodies. So it could be 10% impact in one, 50% in another, and then the rest is spread across another 3, or it could be 100% in one water body. So it is quite a simplified process. But what the Fix-It tool does is then take those attributions of impact and uses it to decide how much a license needs to be reduced by according to how much they're impacting on a water body and whether or not flows in that water body are sustainable or that license is impacting on downstream water bodies. One thing I didn't mention is that the Fix-It tool won't suggest suggestions in water bodies where groundwater abstraction is less than 50% of the impact on flows. So we'll skip over those water bodies and go on to the next one. So it is a broad brush tool, but it gives that sort of estimate of groundwater reductions.
Thank you. And whoever asked the question, it says anonymous. I'm sure Harry would happily give you more information in the coffee break.
Yep.
There's a question here about participatory models, which is there a way for farmers to find farm advisors who understand water resources? I can give a quick answer to that one. Yes, there is something called the Agri Advisors Hub that's been produced as part of the catchment-based approach, which gives farmers the opportunity to look and see which farm advisors are operating in their catchments and what competencies they have with regard to water resources. So that's available. Is it available on the CABA website? Yes, is the answer. Great. So there's the answer to that one. There's a question here around land use change to achieve. So this is a very English-centric question. Land use change to achieve net zero and the Environment Act, Agri, Water Quality and Biodiversity commitments suggest that 20% of agricultural land will need to change to achieve those targets. Has this been factored in any of the work? Harry, are you able to give a...
Yeah, in terms of the heat maps, no, we haven't looked at land use change. It's certainly something that we're aware of. You know, agriculture and agricultural land will be influential on many different themes, and it is about understanding how they all link together. But in terms of the heat maps, not at this stage. This is just a very indicative piece of information on the potential scale of changes.
Thank you. Going through the questions here, trying to see if there's one. Maybe I can ask Adrien and Philip, is there any land management frameworks in France that would could be adapted to help provide additional water resource benefits in your area? Or is that just too much of a difficult question and I should never have asked it?
I will not respond properly to your question, but
if you could humour me.
I mean, definitely, I think the links between land management and water resource is something that is coming up quite strongly at the moment at the urban level, especially in a neighboring catchment close to the city of Lille, which is very close to. We are currently. They have decided to block any new construction of how do you say that houses and buildings in a specific area that is strategic for the provision of drinking water for the city of Lille. And so we have, in another type of work, we are looking at how this blockage that has been decided some years back can be compensated with other type of development at the territorial level. But anyway, yes, at the moment some decisions are being taken by municipalities to block some development to preserve water resources. But it's mainly at the municipality level.
At the development end.
City level.
Yeah. Thank you. Very specific question coming for you, Harry. How would somebody outside of the Environment Agency find out the water abstraction license and actual abstraction of a water supply company?
Right, so license information is public record. So you can do a freedom of information request to the EA to ask for that information. In terms of recent actual volumes, we can, but it's trickier to release that information. But I do think that in water resource management plans that information can be found as well, and they're public record. So there are various sources that you could look at for those.
So it can be found, it's just not that easy.
Yeah, but as I say, freedom of information request.
Thank you. And sorry for another question, Harry. This will be the final one, I think, of this session. Is in the groundwater abstraction maps, do you know every withdrawal of each catchment?
In terms of, if that's about abstraction volumes, we will know. So most abstraction licenses have a condition that requires people to submit abstraction returns, and they're usually on a monthly basis. There are some licenses that don't require that simply because of their scales, so they may be more of an estimate in terms of how much has been abstracted, but these are more sort of household abstractions, very small abstractions. So in terms of the significant abstractions in the catchment, we do get that information from the abstractors.
Excellent, thank you very much, and thank you all of you, and particularly you, Philippe, for answering that last question, which was very unfair of me. So if you could give the presenters a final round of applause. We've got plenty of time to get lots of caffeine inside us, so we're ready to go for the final session. So I assume the coffee's back through the boardroom again, so please take time to network and enjoy the break. Thank you.